hauling lead, coal, anything heavy you didn't want to take over the roads. So the canal itself, I want to drag your eyes away from the really exciting bit just for now. So the canal itself obviously ran behind you and followed the hedge line. You can see it running all the way along. You can just see what's sort of left of it, running all the way around the brow of the hill there. So what we've got here is actually sort of not directly part of the main canal. It's fed into it. But what there was here is there's a couple of different phases of activity going on here. So the first thing that was been here for a long time, at least since the late 1700s, is you see this horrible dark stuff my colleague has stood in there, this big sort of black splodge. That is a basin which they would have used to turn around. So if you imagine again the edge of the canal, so this wall here, this slightly, I know that the really impressive one is the one you want to look at. If you look at the slightly more naff one in front of you, those of you stood on that side of the wall, you're on solid ground. Those of us stood on this side of it, we're in the basin. Does that make sense? And then the basin comes about round here. So that wall itself, difficult to say how old that wall is itself. But you can kind of see it's quite basic construction. There's wooden stakes slapped into it. It's got a mix of big stones, bricks of kind of all different ages, a couple of more modern bricks, a couple of quite old looking bricks. So this is the edge of the basin. So the basin was here, we're going to use it to turn around, and then at some point they've decided they need a wharf. There's a couple of different sort of suggestions. There's pits, coal mines over there, which they were gone. There was a gas works that had a couple of different phases, basically just sat where those houses are. There's a possibility that when the gas works first started, it may have been coal gas. So they would have needed to bring coal out and ash and all sorts of stuff. Coal in and ash and all sorts of stuff back out. So they built the star attraction, this wharf. So you can see you've got two very large stone walls. You've got the farther one curving off that way, closer one curving off towards us, and you've got the entrance there, and you can just about see, if you see the little indentation on the entrance of the far thing where the planks would have gone, so they could drain it in and out. So the wharf itself would have run off. Basically, it wouldn't have gone straight. It would have run off, and it ran at a slight diagonal and ran off just basically along the back gardens of all these houses here. And that wharf would have just been for loading. And part of the reason they probably put it here was because in order to get a narrowboat through that gap, you need lots of space to orientate yourself to come through. So they probably would have gone, well, look, there's already a basin here with lots of space for us to do that. So let's put the wharf here. They built these really substantial. I mean, you can it's nice having this sort of more regular canal wall, so you can compare it to the main one. So this wall in front of us represents what you might expect from the side of a canal, just sort of enough to hold it up, nothing major. That wall is designed for a couple of reasons. Our big walls. One, because when these barges were full of coal or whatever, even if they're not travelling very fast, if they hit something, it's a hell of a whack. So if they whacked a canal wall like this, if they built these walls like this one in front of us, they'd just destroy it. The first time they hit it, and we'll show you when we get down there, there's a couple of points that clearly hit it and gouged big chunks out of the stone. So they've built this really quite substantial stone wall that runs off, and again, like I say, runs off under the back of these houses. It carries on, we've not got all of it, it carries on right where our colleague is, right at the far end there. And the other reason they would have built these big stone walls on the wharf is because if you imagine the weight of coal coming in and out, if you're stood on the edge of the canal and you put 3 tons of coal on it, the whole side of the canal will just collapse in. So what you need is a really solid stone wall as a platform to stand on, and then you can load or unload as you like. So yeah, that's sort of that's the basic overview. What we'll do is unless anyone's got any quick questions now, if anyone's asking about where the boat is, we've stood on it. So there's one. So if anyone sees one sticking out here, so that boat on the little placard there, this is the prow of it just here, and it's just running out under where you guys stood, and the rest of them are a bit further down that way. So unfortunately, our remit here was not to find boats, it's to find this, which obviously we found. Which is a shame, because I would have loved to see them. I've only seen photos, but
is this stuff all going to get buried then? These walls,
yeah. So basically, as I understand the plan, and I don't want to put words in. So we're York Archaeology. We're not part of the Canal Trust. I don't want to put words in their mouth. As I understand the plan, they do want to, when they come to redo all of this stuff, they are planning to put the basin back in. not just the canal. They're going to put the basin back in because, like I said, the basin it's been in part of the canal since 1780s. So while it's not part of the very, very original canal, it's almost near as close. You know, near as it makes no difference.
So those blocks might stay.
So, well, yeah. So I know we're working them out, but we're gonna. So what we're gonna have to do is once we're done, we're gonna have to come back in and recover them. When they come to dig out this basin, I would imagine those blocks are not going anywhere. You know, you could leave them and then recover them, and they'll still be there. And as I'll show you when we get down there, they're absolutely solid. You know, they're not going anywhere. So obviously the wharf they could never replace because people's houses are on it now. I don't know how persuasive they could be, but probably not that persuasive. So
has this sunken down then? Is this the actual original level?
Water level.
No, well, yeah. So you preempted me again. So
I'll keep quiet.
no. It's a very good question. So no, these haven't. I don't think. So I think they have sunken a bit. 'Cause obviously we're in clay, something 150 years old. There's going to be a bit of subsidence. But I don't think these walls have. I mean, they definitely haven't sunk. You know, by meters. If they've sunk, it's centimeters. I think it's a really good. Where my colleague is there, straight from the trowel, those stones are the top of the. Because you can see the way they're sort of curved off as well. But, you know, that is the top of the stones. So the height of the canal would not have been far below that point. So actually, it makes you realise. If you imagine when you guys were stood up here, and then you realise what the height of the canal. And there was no lock.
No.
There's nothing like that. What we stood on. So you realise how much height you've lost off the canal. Or gained, I should say. So the canal, how much higher the canal, what's left of the canal is now, and you realise, you know, really, if we were stood here when the canal was active, we'd all be floating in the air.
Yeah.
You know, this is all sort of made ground that's come up.
So have you measured the height of that then in relation to the original height or not?
No, not yet. What we'll do is we'll get levels. So we'll get levels. So we'll get levels of this, and we'll get levels of stuff up there, and we'll compare the difference.
Right.
The only difficulty is that. We know that the obviously it's all bulldozed in the 70s and what's left of the canal, but we don't know what, you know, they weren't doing it at a specific level. They were just bulldozing it until it was gone, so they won't have followed a set sort of level at all. So I mean, hopefully, like I say, when the canal is reinstated, you'll see it. You know, it'll be reinstated and you'll be able to it'll come straight in. But yeah, so unless any questions at this point, we'll wander down and we'll take a closer look. If that makes sense to everyone.
It's good, yeah.
Yeah.
No, because this was it said they were on dry land and we're in the
but that wall doesn't go into that curve of that wall, so maybe there's a
To change your boots when we get back to the van, put some different shoes on.
shoes, yeah.
Yeah.
I've only got two pair of trainers, so.
see all the kids.
Same colour as well.
Wouldn't believe they even had McDonald's. Look. Recognise the cup. Not changed in 200 years.
Crazy. So all systems go. Contractors start digging out as soon as the clay. No, they go up.
I've left loads of mud here anyway.
There's no drainage pipe. Look.
So this is probably the last tour I give because I keep standing on here and standing on the clean bits the volunteers have done, so they might be about to strangle me. So, fair enough. Well, you got a ready-made pit to bury me. So, you see it a bit better now, guys, and sort of again, theatre of the mind. So again, if you imagine if this was the wharf for gasworks or loading coal or whatever, so in order to say they were coming in to be loaded, They come in, or well, in this way, or up the canal. They come into this basin. They'd orientate themselves so they could get through here in one go. Come in, and then the wharf would run. So some of you guys are stood in it. You guys are sort of stood off to the side of it, and then come up and run this way. And again, yeah, under the back of these houses. So as you can see close up, it's a really, I mean, I'm a bit surprised when we're not here, no one's going taking photos and being like, oh, they found Chesterfield Castle. Because it's really, you know, you could almost believe looking at this was a castle entrance, couldn't you? I mean, it's a bit low down. Chesterfield Sunken Castle. But yeah, so we've got quite sort of traditional wall construction. So you can see you've got really, really big dressing stones going around the outside. At the back, they've been packed with sort of less sort of nice stuff, rubble, and then they've been lime mortared together. And these stones, what's interesting about them, they tell us quite a few different stories. So obviously you've got the nooks here, so this would have been for your stock tanks. So if they wanted to drain the wharf, they'd obviously put these in, and they could. You've got a couple of other interesting stuff about them. I don't know how many of you see these sort of weird holes that have been printed in quite a few of them. So there's one here right in front of me, there's a couple there. Yeah, some of you can see the ones in the ones here. These puzzled us a bit because a couple of reasons. It's hard to tell. They don't run sort of consistently the whole way. So they're not a fence that goes around the edge. What's more puzzling is we've lost on this row here. We've lost a layer of stones. Can you see that there's 5 big ones on the top? Originally, this would have carried on at that height all the way around. So these holes would be completely covered and therefore completely useless. And these ones down here, for example, they've been mortared over. You know, so they cannot have been for anything. Which means, and I'm sure someone's already guessed this, a lot of this stonework has come from somewhere else, that a previous use. I've got a few theories about what for. Those of you who are into sort of your early railways, this one's a really good example here. This sort of reddish one. There's 2 holes in a sort of plate, rectangular divot. So the early railways and tramways didn't use wooden sleepers. They used stone, almost like millstones, and they would have basically keyed the 2 tracks into a set of stones. So we think possibly a lot of these stones are basically early railway sleepers that as they started replacing them with wooden sleepers, they would have gone, well, we're not in use for this anymore. But of course, as it is now, stone's expensive, so rather than chucking it, they'll have reused it. And these ones here, where the holes are far too close to the edge of to be useful. If that was a fence post for this, and you had an iron rod in that, and you gave it too much of a thing, it would pop out. You know, there's not enough strength in the stone. So the fact that these stones with holes in are actually half of the railway. Sort of sleepers is a strong word, because sleepers imply that they're wrong, but they're not sleepers. They're sort of individual ones running along. So they've reused stone. There's a few more bits they've reused. There's interesting. I don't know how many you can see. See these capstones right on the top. There's 5 of them, and you can see from there's some odd sort of nooks cut out of them. Also don't seem to make sense for this. So they were probably part of a building keyed into them. And if you look at the middle one, there's 5 of them. There's 1, 2, 1, 2, and then one right in the middle. For those of you can see, the one right in the middle is really, really worn out. The top of it's very worn. It's had a lot of football. The ones either side don't have any. You know, have a bit, but they're nowhere near as worn. So unless when this was in use, someone was just tap dancing on that one stone. That stone has been worn out in its sort of previous life, and then it's been reused here. If that makes sense. There's a few other sort of interesting bits we found. So the wall obviously runs off to your right, my left. And it runs and it carries on, so it doesn't stop. So we've not actually got the full extent of it. It runs off, and so it will carry on with the wall. The wall here to your side doesn't. It turns and stops quite abruptly, which is odd, because where's the other side of the wall? So one of our theories is you have sort of a little. It's a wharf for loading, but is a possibility? It's a bit of a slipway. So effectively, where you're stood, there's a sort of a shallow slope that they went, well, we can use this for loading and unloading, but it's useful as sort of almost like a very primitive dry dock, because they can bring it up onto the edge and make any repairs to any boats that they need. There's a few other sort of bits and pieces. No, you've got this pipe coming down here. This is quite a big drain. So you've got a brick culvert up there with no pipe in it, then comes down, and this pipe is a later addition, as far as we can tell, because it appears to it basically smashed through the wall of this. So this pipe is coming much later. There's also my favourite pipe, which is that pipe there, you see going over the edge. Someone at some point that pipe just goes over the edge into the basin and then stops about that far down. So at some point, someone's just put a cast pipe onto it and it's pumped, God knows what, into the basin. And you might be able to tell by all the oil. There's all sorts into it. So this is, I mean, this is prior any sort of environmental regulation. So no one's going to care. But yeah, of course, there's gasworks there, so you don't really know what's gone into this. I spoke to a few people who've said they used to swim in it, and I said, "What was it like then?" And they were like, "Horrible." But yes, what else have we got? So the other curious thing is, and it's nice in terms of like what we call phasing, in that we can sort of try and understand how everything is fit together, because I'm sure probably you can already tell there's a distinction between that wall there, that little one, and this is serious stonework, and that's, you know, quite tiddly in comparison. So actually it's quite likely that this stonework and that sort of canal sort of bank aren't contemporaneous at all. In fact, that bank may actually be more related to the original 1700s bank. Now it does have more modern brick, later brick and materials in it. All that means is, it doesn't mean it's not the 1700 bank, it means they've repaired it over the years with whatever they've got, bits of brick. Because there's brick in there. There's some piece of brick that's really, I don't know if you've ever seen the sort of really like, sort of quite early brick. It's very thin, very narrow before they were doing it, sort of not doing it right, but sort of doing it a bit more sort of crudely. And it's also got some bits of frog brick in it, which is when it's got the little sort of gap, which is quite modern. So you've got all sorts. That wall is telling us a bit of a story by itself of a I say wall's the wrong word, bank of the edge of the canal that's been built up and repaired over the years. The other interesting thing with phasing is sort of talking to people. A lot of people can remember this either being a bit of a pool, or if not that, wet ground. You know, like, you know, the reeds growing in it. You know. Various wet grasses and stuff like that. But what you're stood on, no one can remember this wall. No one has any memory of it being there at all. And that sort of makes sense because, as you guys can tell, what you're stood on, it's quite solid. It's quite dry. It's not, you sort of compare to what you're stood on, and then you compare what you've got there, and you can see there's this bit of a change here. You see, you've got this nice, sort of, I say nice, reasonably nice yellow clay, and then you've got this horrible silt. So what that's telling us is, this area here, up to sort of about here, this is silted up what you might call naturally. Any sort of waterway you have that doesn't get sort of dredged will slowly silt up over years, and gradually it'll just be gone, as has kind of happened with this. But this, what you're stood on, hasn't naturally happened. Someone's come along and filled this all in. They've filled it all in, the whole route. Clearly, because they've basically gone, we're not fussed about this land. We don't care, you know, we're not using it. We don't need it for anything. We need this. We need this wall. And it makes sense because the later gasworks actually extends all the way across. So it's possible it was the gasworks that did it. They went, oh, actually, we need to expand, get rid of this wall. We don't need it. And what's interesting is, right, if you look at the plans, right at the end, it looks like at the end of the wharf kind of coincides with a railway siding coming in. And it's sort of, I hate to get a bit poetic, but it's sort of, obviously, because you all know that railway is the thing that killed the canals. But it's quite rare you get something so poetic, because the railways literally come on top of an old. You've got a railway. This is effectively a canal equivalent of a railway siding, but literally it's been replaced. They've backfilled it and replaced it with a later railway siding, which is quite poetic, I think. But yeah, there's a few more bits to look at, and feel free, guys, now to just have a look around, have a wander around. And please don't stand on these walls because the volunteers will shout at me. But this stuff here has been. I mean, if you can knock a pickaxe to it, that'd be fantastic. But this stuff here has all been recorded, so if you want to come in and sort of investigate here, obviously goes without saying, don't go too close to these edges. And mind your step because it's a bit of ground. But please have a wander around. I'll have a wander around.
They're the holes that he was talking about, but they don't know what they're for and that were covered. No. Wow. You can smell the coal. You can smell the coal when you stood up there.
Wow.
That's fantastic. That's really interesting.
You can, yeah.
Yeah, when he was up there, you could smell the coal.
Yeah.
You could smell it. Yeah.
If you look on the ground, like
Yeah,
the mud there
yeah, you
as
can
well,
see it. Yeah.
Or a similar smell to what coal, like what Dolly used to have
Yeah.
years and years ago.
Yeah.
See here, this is where
And that's the pipe, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you swim in Staveley, you got to smell like you've been swimming in paraffin. You've been down there? No, man.
Wow.
Yeah, really cool.
Seems a bit of a shame that actually they're going to do all this work and then dig it out, and then they're going to cover it all
And
up
bury it again.
and bury it again, and then somebody else may come along and dig it all out again.
Yeah.
It just seems like a waste of effort.
You say, I've been going for canal being down there.
Yeah.
Well, and also,
Really interesting. Oh, that was really interesting.
It's going to take a long time.
Well, have a look at this photograph that he was talking about. I'll read what it says. An act of the creation of Chesterfield Canal was passed by Parliament in March 1771. The route had been designed by John Varley and James Brindley. The route between Staveley and Renishaw ran along the contour of the valley, removing the needs for locks, and was carried on an embankment over the Dolee. The construction of this stretch of the canal took place in 1776. A canal basin was established at the end of Bell House Lane with a connection to a narrow channel for the delivery of coal and to a gasworks just to the south. A road bridge crossed the canal at the end of the Bell House. And there's what your gasworks, and there's the boat.
Yeah, that's the one you stood on top
Yeah.
of.
Yeah,
Cool, isn't it? That is cool, yeah.
I think Chantal was just saying that they can't preserve it because it just costs too much money.
Costs like
So, yeah,
thousands and obviously.
and some of the fines.
They've already got
Store it higher up.
so much more than Staveley than you anticipate.
Yeah.
documented it. It's taken like when
interesting
in
place.
2019 we've documented
Got a lot of
everything.
history.
Measured it, so we could say all that. So apparently there's another one further down as well.
It was good, that. It was really good, really interesting.
Really interesting.